In this video, I'll demonstrate the use of the Paging Bulleted List extender that ships as part of the Microsoft AJAX Control Toolkit. The Paging Bulleted List extender control extends the standard ASP.NET Bulleted List control so that when you have lots and lots of items in your bulleted list, provides a richer mechanism for the user to select which group of those items they want to look at so they can narrow down their search through this massive list of items to choose the item that they're actually interested in. So to get started, as always, I'll fire up Visual Web Developer Express, the free version of Visual Studio for web development. Choose the AJAX Control Toolkit website template to create a new website. First thing that I'm going to do, open up the default.aspx page and go out onto my desktop and grab a CSS file. This CSS file is pared down from what I normally use in these demos. It's just used to provide some selection visual guidance. So when the user selects a section of the list that they're going to look at, they get a little bit of an additional set of guidance there. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a div, and in this div I'm going to specify a class that's in the CSS in our CSS file, and so you can see we've just got the three here. This is the selected index and unselected index. So when the user makes a selection in the index groupings, the currently selected index will be shown with a little bit of a different visual attribute. And then we have this bullet div, which is going to be the div that contains our bulleted list collection. So we just want to have a border around that, and it'll make sense to you when you see it in display. So a couple things we want to do here. First, we want to find the bulleted list control from our standard ASP.NET controls collection. So let's grab one of those. Now, remember we said we're going to pull a lot of data into this list. So I'm just going to use a static collection of data from a snippet that I've defined here. You might want to pull this list out of a database, obviously, or an XML file. Right? So we have this really long list of items here. So if we go back over into design mode, right, you can see that this is just this really long list. And I'm just using a manageable number for the list that works for a demo, but in real-world applications, I'm sure you've written ones where the possible number of selections is even greater than the number of lists here. So often they come out of a database, and the number is really vast. So having done that, now I'm going to use the magic of code folding in Visual Studio. Oops. To shrink that up, and now we can add the Paging Bulleted List extender control. So if we scroll down into our AJAX Control Toolkit tab that we created from the instantiatable controls in the AJAX Control Toolkit DLL, and we can find the Paging Bulleted List extender, and let's pop that in. This is just telling me that because we chose a toolkit template site for this website, the DLL is already exists, and that's okay. So now we can configure the various arguments to the extender control. So as always, you're going to begin with the target control ID, which in our case is going to be our bulleted list. So we've folded that out in the div there, so it's going to be, this is going to be our identifier. So the target control ID will be bulleted list 1. Next, we want to specify an identity for the behavior, and basically we're just going to fabricate an ID for the default behavior, and this is so that we can program against this. So we're going to modify the behavior at runtime. So let's just call this paging bulleted list behavior 1. So we're just providing an identity that we can program against for the default behavior in this control. What else do we want to say? Let's client sort equal true. So let's allow the allow this list data to be sorted on the client. If you need to implement some complex sorting mechanism, you'd want to sort it back on the server, but in our case we're going to just sort it on the client, so there's no round trip when the user wants to change the sort order in which they view the items. We're going to specify the index size, and we'll just use 1 per item. We want to specify a separator to separate the sections. You'll see where this makes sense when we once we run the demonstration. A couple other things. Selected index CSS class, and you saw this defined in the CSS file. So the name was select index, and then of course we had an unselected as well. So the unselected CSS class was unselect index. Oops. And that should do it for that. However, as I mentioned, one of the things that we want to do here is we want to be able to modify to some extent the behavior, so the sort of sorting and paging behavior. So let's move this inside the div that contains our bullet, and then down here let's add some options that we can use to set properties and manipulate the appearance of our bulleted list. So let's create an input field. ID is radio option 1. Name is radio option. Type is radio. And let's see. Let's specify a value of 1, and checked equals checked. And I don't know why these don't get put in quotes by default. That's my preference, so that's what I'm going to do. I find that it gives me fewer difficulties. Now I'm going to program an on-click event handler. Now the actual code that handles this on-click event is going to be JavaScript code that we're going to write in a little bit. So for now we'll just shell out with the name that we will use when we write this code, and we'll call this on change select option. That's just a JavaScript function that we haven't called yet. And for you VB programmers that aren't used to case sensitivity, you want to remember that JavaScript is case sensitive. So if you're a C# programmer, that's second nature to you. Okay, so let's close that out. Just do a little beautifying here. And then let's just add a label so we can tell the user what choice they're actually making here. So we'll add a label, associate it with radio option 1, and call that index size 1. And now let's add a few more of these. So let's make this radio option 3 just because of the way we want to sequence them. And let's see. Radio option, I want to fix the casing in that name so it's not erroneous. So input radio option 3, radio option, we want the value to be 3, and this is not going to be checked, so it's not going to be the default. And on click again, let's see, on change select option, so okay, and this is going to be index size, let's see, let's make this 10 items per page. Now let's do a couple more of these. Alright, so we'll make this, let's see, radio option 3, radio option 2, and we want the label to wire to radio option 3 as well. Oh, sorry, 2. Forgot about the sequencing that we were doing here. And so we want the value to be 2 as well. And so index size is equal to 2. And let's add a 4th option. So the ID will be radio option 4. The value for this option will be 4. We want this label to be associated with radio option 4. And let's make this one 20 items per page. Okay, so we've got four radio buttons that will specify how many items we want to see on a page. One more thing we want to add here is let's add a checkbox. So let's say input type equal checkbox. And we're going to use this checkbox to determine whether or not we want to sort the items. So let's see. Let's set the ID equal to client sort. All right, so client sort. Let's make this selected as checked by default, and set up an on-click event to on change client sort, and check my spelling there. Okay. Oops. Give ourselves a line feed there, and then of course one of the things we want to do here is do this elsewhere. So let's see. Let's give ourselves some grouping here. So let's see. Give us a break there. Give us a break there. And then we should just, for completion's sake, add a label for the checkbox. So let's specify a label for our client sort checkbox, and that'll just be called sort. Okay, so what we've got so far is we've got this massive list, bulleted list with all these items included. We've wired up a paging bulleted list extender from the AJAX control toolkit, identified both the control for the bulleted list as well as the named the behavior, specified some CSS, and now we've created a collection of buttons on the page that will let us set the index size, so we want to see 1 or 2 or how many items per page, and allow us to turn on and off client sorting. The one thing we have left to do, of course, is to implement the JavaScript code that handles these events. So let's go ahead and do that now. So up here at the top of our page, let's go ahead and say, let's add some script, and the language is going to be JavaScript. Sorry, not ECMAScript, JavaScript. And the type is text JavaScript. Now, the first thing we need is we're going to just add a local variable. Index handler. And remember, for you VB programmers, we're in JavaScript now, so semicolons at the end. Let's add a function for, and the first one we need to program against was on selected index changed. So let's go ahead and define that. On change select option. The first thing we need to do is we need to get that behavior that we identified as the default behavior for our list extender. So let's go ahead and do that by saying var bl equals find, and we're passing in the literal name of the behavior, which is this behavior here. So we'll pop that in. Now we can say if so if get radio option 1 dot checked then BL set max item per page BL set index size equal to 1. Right? So remember that option 1 down here had a meant that the index size was going to be 1. Right? So and we're actually going to use again the magic of cut and paste. So in this case we're going to say if get radio button option 2. Alright, so if 2 is checked, then it's 2. If 3 is checked, then we're going to say, we don't care about the index size, but let's set the max items per page equal to 10. And last, if radio option 4 is selected, let's set the max items per page equal to 20. Alright, so that's good for the on-change select option. The other thing we need to do is we wanted to change the on-client sort option. So let's create a JavaScript function to handle that. We'll say and here we'll simply say again we're going to get the behavior, so let's just grab that from the previous JavaScript function, and we'll simply say b1 dot set client sort and we're going to get the client sort checked state, so we'll say get client sort, and that was the remember client sort was what we called this checkbox, and here we'll say get client sort dot checked. Okay, so there we've wired up the JavaScript to the various selection items that we've defined on our page, and those JavaScript functions program against the paging bulleted list extender by way of the behavior ID that we created. And let's take a quick scan of our code. Oh, see the bug? Get uses text, so it's not an object lookup. It just iterates through the object collection on the page and looks for ones whose IDs match this text. So, okay. So let's go ahead and run our application. So you'll notice that we've got the list has been built, and we can iterate through. So if we want, for example, all the ones that start with the letter A, all the ones that start with the letter M, for example. If we want to change the index size, note the index size is 1 now, so A, B, C, etc. If we want to change the index size to 2, notice what the effect of that is. So it's now AB, AD, AL, right? So it lumps an index size together of 2. Let's go back to index size 1 and specify we want 10 items on a page. All right, so in this case, it's just going to break up all of the items in the list by in groups of 10, and the clickable index becomes the first of each of those groups of 10. Again, if we set it to 20, same thing. If we unsort, oh, error, B1 is undefined. Okay, let's go ahead and fix that error. Little typo there. BL instead of B1. Let's go ahead and run it again. Right, so now let's click on unsort, and again, they're not sorted, they just sort of come in the way that they are. So that's it. It's that easy to use the paging bulleted list extender control. It ships as part of the Microsoft AJAX Control Toolkit to organize the way that you present lots and lots and lots of options to your user, and then allow them to have some dynamics about how they organize the way that they scroll through all of those items, so they can very quickly get to the appropriate item in a very large collection of items.